Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for being here, for those who are here in presence, for this very important moment, because finally we are reopening trade fairs in presence, and we really appreciate this experience after this very long period of closure and forced closure, so to say. We are here within the Mid-Tech exhibition, an exhibition ASSICA is a partner of for many years, so we promote this exhibition with great satisfaction. And so we thought of organizing together with Mid-Tech. I like to greet Rossano that I see over there in the audience. So we thought of organizing this conference, this workshop on the new official controls, the new propositions on official control vis-a-vis food, and also enacting decrees, because everything starts from a European regulation that entered into force many years ago. Now it is applied, and so we have had two decrees in March this year, and they specify in more detail the new obligations that businesses have to fulfill for official controls. So I don't want to waste much time. We have plenty of interesting speakers because we have been able to involve all institutions that are part of this process, not just for food safety, but we also have the Ministry for Health, Region Lombardy, Veterinarian Services, but also quality labeling practices along the agricultural and food supply chain. So we have plenty of institutions involved. So again, I said the Minister for Health, then the regional authorities, local health authorities, the Ministry for Agriculture, Forestry, and so on. And we also have institutions for quality control. So this is a very broad topic, very interesting, and we see a lot of novelties. So I think this afternoon will be very interesting for all of us. I don't want to waste the time. I leave the floor to Ruggero Lenti, President of ASSICA. He will give us a short introduction, some greetings, and then he'll leave the floor to the speakers. So Ruggero, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome. I'd like to welcome people that are present here and those who are connected online. And I'd like to thank speakers because they will describe these regulations that will affect the way we work. And so as businesses, we will have to adjust in a quite important way to this new set of regulations. So this topic is quite technical. So I just would like to read a couple of things not to be wrong. So starting from 14 December 2019, all the European member states started to implement the regulation 625, and it entered into force in April 2017. And this is part of a regulation package that was proposed previously. So this has streamlined the situation in order to ease the situation of the regulations with 5 regulations, with plenty of benefits as regards the cut of red tape and the streamlining of activities for all operators. So the regulation 625 will actually modify a part of the existing legislation, and it abrogates some of them. Nationally speaking, we see 2 regulations put into place. The Decree 22/2021 that entered into force in March 2021, related to the regulation, European regulation 625. So competencies, we confirm that the Ministry for Health, regions, and also the autonomous regions and the local health authorities are in charge of planning, assessing, and monitoring and implementing official controls in the field of food and food safety. including the healthy controls related to the feed and the well-being of animals. MIPAF is the authority in charge of some of these aspects as regards to the regulations that want to guarantee fair practices and also the interest of consumers, including labeling for profiles that has no impact on the feed and also the labeling of DOP and EGP. Fundamentally, we see two non-compliances, minor compliances with no immediate risk for human health, and major non-compliance where we have an immediate risk, and there we see some important actions such as some blocks and also confiscation of goods. I like not to go too much into details as regards the technical aspects, but I'd like to stress two important points. So the first is that the streamlining of the regulations is very positive for businesses, because if we can reduce red tape, we can benefit from it. And from this corpus of laws, we actually see the interest of defending consumers. So we actually hope this element is taken into consideration when, in practice, we will find out how to implement these actions. So we think that businesses producing and producers, of course, are actually all in line with laws, because they try to perform their activities respecting the health and the interest of people, of consumers. So we really need to control so that the health of consumers is respected, but at the same time we have to be sure that when a company is working well, the company is able to defend itself in case of an accident or of a problem, because sometimes it is impossible not to have an accident or an event in some good and merchandise sectors, such as for meat. So even if you work very well, you might have some events, negative events or accidents or to take into consideration. That is to say, we have to take into consideration the way the company works, with the support of documents and actions performed within the company. But this is something that we want to take into consideration, because this is a common point within the legislation. So it is good to cut bureaucracy, but we must be sure to have the rights of defense in a sense of equity, so to say. I think I'm done with my small speech, and now I leave the floor to the speakers, because I'm sure they will share with you interesting aspects, more interesting aspects than mine. Thank you very much, President. I'd like to ask Giovanni Granitto to come on stage from the Ministry for Health. Let's talk about the new official controls for food safety and the way this can be financed. We know that within the new legislation there was a change in the financing of these official controls, with some substantial changes that will enter into force next January. So thank you very much for being here. I'd like to ask Filippo Castoldi from Lombardy region to come here close to Giovanni, because we will deal with the food safety section first. So Filippo has been working for Region Lombardy for many years, and he'll talk about the assessment of non-compliance and obligations of economic operator. So, for sure, this is a point of reference for us. So, Giovanni, the floor is yours first. Thank you very much for inviting us. I'd like to greet you from our General Direction. I'm Giovanni Granitto from the Minister for Health. I work in the field of food safety, and I mainly deal with animal-based food as regards the legislations, the working group, all the guidelines, the regulation at the European level, and so everything that concerns enacting decrees that discipline all the aspects that were actually stated by Davide and by the President. So I like to go forward because I think that this is a quite complex topic, but I'd like to give you more information, if it's possible, as regards the legislation decrees. So we started from 625 as decree. So this is regulation that actually abrogates 882 and 884. And so it entered into force in April 2017 and the 14th of December 2019 is the main date that we have to remember for enacting decrees. Then the regulation 625 is quite broad, is quite important. It develops and harmonizes some sectors that with 882 were actually not included.
Mentre l'882 discende dal 178
882 comes from 178, and so it was more focused on food safety and animal-based products. But now 625 as a regulation includes a set of other sectors that were not included in the past.
And
so 625 regulation, what are the sectors? So food safety, feed, NGOs, animal health, animal well-being, then plant health, and so on. Veterinarian medicine are not included because they are more part of an experimental sector, so to say. So what are the differences between this regulation and 882 regulation? So health of plants, then material for the reproduction of plants, then animal byproducts and subproducts, and GOs, and the one that you saw on the slide. So all these had an impact on the role and organization of the authorities, on the staff and personnel working on these official controls, and so the impact on national propositions is the one that you see on the slide. So the creation of the new authorities in charge of these. And so the new regulation modifies all the exchanges, the imports, and last but not least, the decree related to official controls and also tariffs. So with the law 117, so the government is delegated to issue enacting decrees related to the 625 regulation. It entered into force the 2 November 2019, and starting from that date we had 12 months to be able to create these 4 regulations that are extremely important and that organize again official controls and then abrogate, as you see on the slide, some national norms and laws that are not in line with this new regulation. Then, of course, all the exchanges with the decree, then the financing of official controls, and then 24, the regulation of everything that is related to the exchanges, where we have the PIF, the USMAP, so the new organization of the controls at the frontier. Then we have the 7 criteria. Sanction system. We tried to finish also this part. So at the end of October 2020, we presented the 4 decrees coming from a work of coordination with regions. Even Mr. Castoldi took part of this, and it was also voted within the Conference of Regions on the 3rd December 2020, if I'm not wrong. So it was approved in the State Region Conference. Then the 27 decree, the 32 decree, the ones that I coordinated, also went through the Parliament procedures, so for agriculture, production activities and so on, and we received favorable opinions. So within the Council of Ministers on January 2021, we had the approval of these 4 legislative decrees, getting into the core of the 27. So we are talking about a framework legislative decree that has as a goal to be able to explode all the topics related to the 625 regulation, and then also to have an effect on the activity related to sanctions, so the abrogation of all the norms and laws related to that. So this is a legislative decree that wants to reorganize the previous situation, starting with the previous laws and all the regulations that were quite outdated and were in contrast with the new regulation vis-à-vis official controls. So this is a framework legislative decree that actually designates the competent authorities and also the issue of the compliance and non-compliance, and also the second expert opinion, as Dr. Menditto will say, and all the official actions related to the national labs, the health institutions, the Ministry for Health that was not included in the past, ARPA, then official labs. And so we can say that we are taking into consideration all the official labs that will control
di una slide per quanto riguarda i laboratori che si occupano di mangimi.
Related to the feed. So the labs that work on feed up to this legislative decree were not actually included, but starting from this moment, they need to be accredited as lab and also as a test, and they must be included in a regional list. So, the important thing of this legislative decree, as Filippo was saying, is related to the aspect that involved us the most, so which are the competencies of the Ministry for Health and also of the forestry. So you see the competencies, so food on the left, everything that has an impact on safety and food safety, on animal well-being and so on. But what I'd like to highlight is that for food, the competencies for the Minister of Food and Agriculture Policies is related to ensure fair trade practices and also to defend the interests of our consumers in terms of labeling for profiles that has no impact on food safety. So this is the huge differentiation between the two ministries. So everything that has no impact on food safety falls within the competencies of agricultural ministry. Then as for harmful microorganisms, plants, the use of labeling, then also the the protected origins and so on, these all fall within the competencies of the other ministry. So with this slide,
cioè con l'articolo 2
I
vengono dati anche
to
quali sono le competenze
show you the
di
competencies
coordinamento con gli altri,
in terms of
con le altre istituzioni,
coordination
e quali
with
sono
other
le
institutions.
competenze del Ministero della
So
Salute,
what are also the
responsabile dello
competencies
scambio di
for the
con gli altri
Ministry
stati
for
comunitari,
Health? It is
per
responsible for the exchange of
l'assistenza
information with
amministrativa,
other member
l'articolo 103
states,
e 107 del
support,
articolo
administrative
25,
support,
coordina e contatti con l'UE per i controlli ufficiali
and also the coordination and contact with the EU for official controls, also the coordination with the national institutions. It is responsible for organizing and coordinating controls
per quanto riguarda la sanità
at the
animale,
national level in terms of animal well-being.
non ultimo l'adozione,
And last but not least, the implementation. It is responsible for implementing national plans
per quanto riguarda
to harmonize
alimenti, piano nazionale
all the national plans related to food, to feed, and so on.
Scambio informazioni ai sensi dell'articolo 102 e 107 per quanto riguarda l'assistenza amministrativa con gli altri paesi.
Whereas the MIPAF is responsible for information exchange and also Defense Ministry.
Noi l'avevamo in precedenza, gli avevamo dato alcuni compiti con
We gave them some tasks,
in questo caso l'abbiamo messo proprio nel decreto legislativo perché
and now they were included in the legislative decree because the Ministry for Health, vis-à-vis structures and activities conducted within this field, they are responsible for that, and they can also perform some control activities on the supply of food, of feed, and so within this scope.
Ho messo, diciamo che ho estratto dal
decreto
legislativo 27 gli
to extract from the legislative decree number 27 the most important elements, just to be brief. The Ministry for Health can be supported by Carabinieri,
in cui prendono qualsiasi tipo di provvedimento, informano le
and they will in turn inform competent authorities about their actions. And so, as regards the hierarchy, so Carabinieri relies on the Ministry for Defense, but for the technical aspects in this sector, they rely on the collaboration with the Ministry for Health, just to be able to perform some controls. As for Article number 4, official controls and official activities, so competent authorities can carry out official controls according to the risk category assigned and with the adequate frequencies. So, as regards these controls, we have included this in the 212 guidelines, where we established the minimum frequency of the official controls according to the different risk categories of the plans. So, high, medium, and low risk, so to say. These official controls are performed without previous notice
ed è giustificato da un'esigenza operativa dalla presenza
if there is maybe the need to have a specific organization, the presence of other authorities, of a specific operator, because in some cases it is possible that the plant is open only during some days of the week. So we have actually realized that these controls can be performed without previous notice, but in some cases with the previous notice. So they also elaborate written documents, a kind of report that can be also an electronic report, and then transparency. This is another element that is included in the 6225 regulation, because every year we should publish controls performed on the territory. And then, last but not least, a very important aspect is related to food that is sold online, the so-called e-commerce. So we are talking about e-commerce at the European level. We have not been able actually to find an agreement with the different member states, but we are trying at the community level and also at the national level to create some common ground to perform this kind of control. As regards Article number 5, Filippo will talk about this, is related to non-compliance, minor and major non-compliance. And for sure Filippo will go into details. And I'm sure, Filippo, you will touch all these aspects. And so we have established also the concept that I can have official block or sequestration of the goods, criminal sequestration as well, in case of criminal offenses, and also health sequestration or block. As for non-compliance, and for this article, everything actually was about the first structure of the document. In that first structure, we also included some aspect related to sanctions and penalties. But for some reasons, notwithstanding the fact that the document was approved in December 2020, and the regions gave their consensus to the document with some amendments, so considering all the integrations and so on, sanctions and penalties were included, but then the document of the Council of Ministers actually was modified. Sanctions and penalties were no more included, and the only thing that remained vis-a-vis the conflicts, let's say, within the different authorities was just related to Article 5 and also another article that we are still in force. With Law 71 and the legislative decree, this aspect were actually removed from the final documents, and this article was related to penalties and sanctions, as I was saying. So what I'd like to stress here is that the current legislative decree should not be considered only like this. There is something missing, because the Council of Ministers should have approved also the other part in order to have a complete document, because all articles were actually following the same logic. Even the disputes part, everything actually was included. But of course, taking out a very important article like Article 18, we now are missing a very important pillar within this document, and we, in short, will try, and I'd like to inform you because you are the stakeholders of this sector, we are about to present the new draft for all these aspects related to sanctions and penalties. So Article 6, obligations for operators. Operators should guarantee to competent authorities some aspects when they undergo official controls, also related to IT systems, animals and goods included, information and documents that are actually present in the different IT systems. And then We have to ensure that the authorities can take some sampling to perform analysis, and also they have to ensure that the personnel is trained properly. And this is another aspect that we actually wanted to include in order to eliminate another problem. So the training is now in charge of operators. Training should be something that is entrusted to operators, and we have to control the effectiveness of these activities, actually, of training. Then Article 7, second expert opinion. Official labs, I have already touched this aspect. And then we also have Article 12. Article 12 related to the fact that we want to have a kind of registry. All of the registries related to the plants and the operators should be part of database. Because now we are struggling to have this data also at a regional level. Then we have a common data bank for official controls. This is something that we like to have, also considering all the activities related to the sanctions and penalties, and what we will also see with the use of another important tool, that is the injunction that can be applied, and the operator should not have this data. Then abrogation, as I was saying, 20 abrogations that went through the Decree 42 and Law 71 changed again, because we know that previous laws have been included again in the new ones. So this was actually a great loss for us, because our goal was to eliminate article number 5. We were talking about that with Filippo. This is an article that, also considering data, cannot be applied anymore. It is in contrast with the EU legislation. This is an article that creates a lot of problems for us. And when we verify actually the use of this article, we are talking about 20% of sanctions. So you have to consider that, for example, a single operator in fishing can also suffer from this article, and other single operators. But I like to say that for fundamental aspects, we have some criminal basis for that. And so we have the possibility to apply some criminal laws, and the article number 5 could actually have not been included, according to my opinion. Within the previous Article 18, we had some aspects related to sanctions, and we wanted to include other penalties, replacing these aspects that were more on the criminal side. Let's go into the detail of the second legislative decree for official control. So this decree is really important. This decree comes from the abrogation of one legislative decree and 2 ministry decrees, and more than 40 other documents. So we have tried to eliminate the previous regulations in order to adjust to the new exhibit of 625 regulation that actually includes new sectors. So it broadens the scope of 194 regulation, because it used to be based on other sectors. The new regulation is actually considering more sectors that are in line with the new scope.
Il campo di
The
applicazione
scope
quindi
again.
va a finanziare tutti quelli che sono i
So it
controlli
finances
ufficiali
official
condotti
controls
dal
performed
Ministero della Salute e dalle ASL.
by
Ma
the
non è
Ministry
che
for Health
questi,
and the
questi
local health
finanziamenti,
authorities. But this financing
queste tariffe vanno completamente a coprire quello che è
completely
l'esigenza delle ASL e del Ministero della
cover
Salute del controllo ufficiale, dal punto di vista no.
the needs.
Con il Fondo Sanitario Nazionale
But not exactly. So with the national fund,
quello che è il Fondo
we
Sanitario
are
Nazionale
able to
per gli aspetti per
integrate
poter coprire
some
quelle che è
resources
l'esigenza
in order to be able to
svolgere
cover the
i
economic needs
controlli
to perform
ufficiali.
official controls.
Sono vincolati alle autorità competenti, come abbiamo detto, e abbiamo già detto i vari
They are
settori che abbiamo già
related
nominato,
to
alimenti, moda,
official
tutto quello che abbiamo
controls. So
detto
we
già
have studied
prima
different
per quanto
sectors,
riguarda
food,
i settori di
animal,
competenza del
sub-products.
625.
We have already said what are the sectors included in 6225
Questo decreto legislativo
regulation.
va ad
This legislative
armonizzare,
decree actually harmonizes
allora quindi va ad ampliare, va
and
come abbiamo detto,
amplifies,
settori che
so
non
to
sono
say,
stati
and broadens
previsti,
the
va
sectors
armonizzato
that were not
alcuni
included. It
settori, quindi
harmonizes
per
some
cercare di
sectors
creare delle tariffe che siano
in order to try
armonizzate
to
per le
create
regioni e
some
territori
tariffs
e
and fares that
stabilimenti
are
che si trovano
adjusted
in
region by
Lombardia
region.
avranno
And so
tariffe
maybe some
che
food
sono
of the
molto
Lombardy region
simili, cioè
will have
sono
some
uguali a quelle che sono
fares
le tariffe
that
della regione
are the
Campania, a
same
quelle delle
that
regioni
you can find in
Sicilia,
region
eccetera.
Campania
Poi
or Sicily in terms of their
armonizzare anche
products.
altri aspetti, per esempio
And
il
it
controllo ufficiale,
harmonizes
tariffe
also other
per il
aspects.
riconoscimento degli
So
statuti.
official
Le tariffe di
controls.
controllo ufficiale oggi per ogni regione applica delle tariffe diverse,
Today,
mentre
each
con
region applies
questo
different
decreto legislativo
tariffs.
noi abbiamo armonizzato anche questi aspetti. Abbiamo
And we
armonizzato,
have
cioè quindi
harmonized
c'è
all
una
these
tariffa di
aspects.
200 euro per le prime 3 ore e
We
per tutta
see
quella che è la
that
parte
maybe we
documentale e poi
have the price
eventualmente allo
for
stato
the first
e ove
300
è
hours, so
necessario
to say,
ulteriori
but then the
attività
plant
si
is big
vanno
and
ad
it needs
integrare
more
ulteriori
activities, and
modalità
so we will
orarie
integrate
finalizzate
maybe
dalla
the
tariffa su
hourly
base oraria per
fare
quello che è necessario.
when it's necessary.
Il disapplicazione non viene applicato agli enti del terzo settore, alle
It is not
associazioni
applied to the
di
third sector
volontariato, agli
bodies,
OSA della
to
produzione
the
primaria, agli OS degli enti
volunteering
privati, da
associations,
cooperative o
to
consorzi agricoli ai
primary
articoli 221
production,
e 35 del codice,
cooperatives,
quando operano per i
according
propri
to Article
associati. Questi
2135.
sono poi, ci sono il decreto
These
legislativo
are
che è formato da 21
related to
articoli
the
e da 3
legislative decrees
allegati.
because it
Il
is
primo
made up of
allegato
21
va a
articles and
disciplinare
3
tariffe per il
exhibits. So
Ministero
the
della Salute,
first
quindi tariffe per quanto
exhibit
riguarda
is
le
in line,
importazioni e
actually
si fa più o
regards
meno in quelle
tariffs
che
for
sono le
imports,
tariffe del
and
625 con l'aggiunta
it is
dell'autorizzazione dei depositi.
related
Dei
to
depositi
the
dell'autorizzazione dei
625
depositi che comunque
regulations
si parla
tariffs, and we
per
also
integrare il codice
have
194
the
che voi
addiction
non era prevista
of
questa tariffa, si parla
warehouses
di 500
because
euro per
this was not
l'autorizzazione
included in the past.
di queste strutture. Per quanto riguarda l'export
As
rimangono le
regards
tariffe
the
previste
exports,
dal passato, quindi 1.500
we
euro per
still
quanto
have the
riguarda
same tariffs
l'autorizzazione,
of the
i
past,
2.000 euro nel momento in cui ci sono
1,500
delle non
euros for
conformità e
authorization,
200
and
euro per le
then
ricertificazioni.
other amounts for non-compliance, and
Che
so
già avevo
on.
anticipato diciamo la slide.
Recertification,
Per quanto
as you see
riguarda
in
le
the
tariffe
slide.
delle aziende sanitarie locali, quindi qua
As
il
for
concetto
local health
che è l'allegato secondo,
authorities
dove si vanno
and their
a
tariff,
dare
we
per le varie
see
sezioni
that
delle
for the different
tariffe. Per
sections
alcune
we
sezioni,
have
diciamo
some
per la sezione 1, per la
fees
sezione 3,
for
per la
section
sezione
number
4 e
1,
5,
3,
sono
and up to
diciamo
5.
tariffe
We are talking
che
about
sono
some
tariffe
fees
che vengono riportate e sono quelle che sono previste nel 625 e
that
tariffe per la
are
sezione 6
actually foreseen
che
by
invece
6225
sono
regulation, and then
completamente
section number
diciamo
6
nuove.
as fees
La
are
sezione
completely
6
new.
nel
So section
194
6
era disciplinata in un
in
modo, nel
194 law was actually
132
disciplined
è
in a
disciplinata in modo
way, and
diverso.
in the new one
Per
it
quanto
is
riguarda,
disciplined
mentre
in a new
nel
way.
194 la sezione 6
In
si basava
194, section number
sui
6 was
quantitativi
based on
e su delle
quantities
fasce, delle fasce
and
in base ai quantitativi
on
di alimenti prodotti. In questo
different
caso noi
ranges
invece
according to the quantity of food.
sulla
In this
spinta,
case,
diciamo quello che è l'approccio del regolamento
considering the
25, quello
approach
di basare
of
le
the
tariffe
621
più su quello che è
regulation,
l'impatto, su
that
quello
we
che è
wanted to
l'impatto del controllo
base
ufficiale
actually
e non
tariffs and
mettere
fees
soltanto
on the
delle tasse
impact of official
e
controls and
basta.
not just to
Abbiamo,
impose
diciamo,
taxes
la sezione
by itself.
6
And so
trasformata in
we
base alla
have
valutazione del
transformed
rischio.
section
Stato
6
chiaro.
according to
Sezione
the
6
category of
in
risk.
base
I
alla
hope I've been
categorizzazione di
clear,
rischio.
not sure
Quindi
I
in 3
was. So it is
sezioni.
made according
La
to
sezione
the
dell'alto
category
rischio,
of risk, and
la
we have
sezione del basso
divided it in
rischio e
3
la sezione
sections:
del
high, medium, and
alto
low
rischio.
risk.
Alto, medio e basso rischio. Con tariffe che sono completamente diverse, sono
With
quasi sono la metà
some fees
delle
that are completely
precedenti.
different,
Però si amplia, diventa più
roughly the
ampio
half
quello che è
compared to the previous one.
diciamo, il numero di operatori che viene applicato.
And
Mentre
we
prima era
broaden
limitato,
the
oggi
number
diventa più
of
ampio, però
operators
nello stesso tempo le tariffe
included,
si, diciamo,
but fees
diventano più
are, so to say,
ridotte.
more
Per quanto riguarda invece
reduced.
la sezione 1 e la sezione 3,
As
sono
for
sempre
section
basate
number 1 and section
nella
number
tariffa più
3,
favorevole da quella che è prevista dalla
according
sezione
to the
e
most
quella che è il
favorable
costo
fee
orario del
of the
servizio,
section, and
che abbiamo
also
detto
the
che
hourly
è
cost of the
stato
service
definito in 8
that was
euro.
calculated and defined
Poi
as
lascio
80
il discorso
euros.
delle trichinelle, non so se può essere, vado avanti. Tariffe per gli
Then I
stabilimenti,
can
vado
go
avanti perché
on.
comunque abbiamo già detto
So
che c'è la sezione
fees
6
for
e
plans, I
quindi
have already
ecco qua il
talked about
discorso delle
this.
tariffe 200,
Section
400
number
e
6.
800
And then
rispetto a
you
prima
see
che
the
erano
fees to
400,
100,
erano tariffe
400,
molto molto più alte.
800 euros. So you see that the fees
Poi il
are
discorso delle
considerably
tariffe per
higher
quanto
compared
riguarda il
to the
riconoscimento della
past.
legislazione che
Then
abbiamo
for
l'ho già
fees,
detto prima, c'è questa armonizzazione
for,
perché
so
c'è
to say,
questa tariffa
recording and
forfettaria
recognition, we
di
have this
200
kind
euro
of
mensili e poi
harmonization
la
because
tariffa su
we
base
have
oraria.
one fee that is defined and
Anche
set,
nella
and then we also
legislazione
have
è
the hourly
previsto
fee.
il
As for the
pagamento di 20
recording
euro
and registration, there is a payment of
e
20
per
euros
l'aggiornamento dell'atto è previsto senza
to be
sopralluogo
considered,
50 euro.
and then
Mentre
50 euros to update the
non pagano
documents.
le tariffe per gli
Then
aggiornamenti delle
fees
registrazioni dei riconoscimenti
for
come i
updating
seguenti casi: sospensione
registrations
dell'order di riconoscimento, sospensione o
are
cessazione, variazione della quota
not to be
massima,
paid
variazione
for
dei
maybe
diritti di
some
rappresentante legale
suspension
e
or
di
withdrawal
società di
of the
capitale. L'abbiamo
recognition.
scritto in modo che possa essere
And
e che
also for capital
ancora
companies,
attualmente
so
è diverso
variation
il
of
comportamento a livello
capital
nazionale. Come questo
companies with the
abbiamo
different legal
unificato.
representatives.
Poi
We
ci sono
actually
altre
stated
tariffe,
all
quella
these
del discorso
examples
della
that are important to
controversia e
be
la
considered.
controversia,
And we
quindi
also
si
have
paga
other
500
fees
euro quando si
related
va
to
in
the second
controversia
expert
per la parte
opinion. So you have to pay
diciamo,
500 euros
per la
if you are in a
documentale e
dispute
poi se si va
and
alla
for documents.
documentale
And then if you go
viene poi richiesta
from there
l'esame di revisione,
and you ask
l'esame
to
definitivo
have the
di revisione si pagano
revision
ulteriori 500 euro. Poi è
analysis, then you'll have
prevista la
to pay
maggiorazione
additional
del
500 euros.
30% per
Then
queste
there is
tariffe
a
su base oraria
30%
nei giorni festivi, cioè in orario
increase
compreso dalle
for
18 alle 6,
hourly
nei giorni
base
festivi, nei giorni feriali con
fees
richiesta inferiore alle 24 ore.
for
Quindi
working
diciamo
days
in queste fasce
and non-working
la
days,
tariffa
but
del controllo
also
ufficiale ha una
we
maggiorazione
have to
del
say
30%,
that the
so
fee
quasi
for
sul
official
limite.
controls
Ok.
actually has an increase of 30%.
L'aggiornamento delle tariffe con decreto
As for the
ministeriale,
updating of
noi
fees
possiamo
with the
sia
ministry
per quanto riguarda il
decree,
decreto
we can
legislativo
say that
27 che sia per quanto
for
riguarda
the
il decreto
27
legislativo
legislative decree and also
32
legislative decree
possiamo andare
32,
ad modificare
we know that we
diciamo, gli
can
allegati
change
e
and
quindi modificare il
modify
collateral free che è
exhibits,
previsto per i decreti legislativi. Io vi
and we
ringrazio,
should not
scusatemi per la
follow all the
velocità, ma purtroppo non
procedures
potevo fare, cioè, ho cercato
foreseen
di
by
essere il più
the
veloce
legislative
possibile.
decree. Sorry
È
if
un
I was
argomento che ci
super
vorrebbe più
fast, but I
di
wanted to
ore e ore.
include
Ok, poi per qualsiasi
as much
domanda,
information
Presidente,
as
vi ricordo che io
possible.
resto
This
a
topic could
disposizione
take
dopo.
hours to be described.
Grazie,
So in
grazie
case you have a
veramente
question,
della
I'm here
sintesi,
available.
effettivamente perché l'argomento era particolarmente
Well, thank you very
interessante,
much. No worries for the time
con
it
molte
took
novità
you
rispetto alle
because
legislative passate.
this
Quindi credo che
is
sono
a
certo che tu sia
topic that
riuscito,
requires a lot
tu
of
sia
time and
riuscito
attention
a
vis-à-vis
rendere,
the
a rendere l'idea
past.
proprio contesto,
We
insomma,
need
poi
to
renderemo disponibile
understand
queste
all of
presentazioni
the
ai nostri ascoltati,
situation,
così che ci sarà
and of
tempo
course,
per le
the
domande eventuali
presentation will
alla
be
fine,
made
se vorrete. Quindi lascio la
available
parola
to our
all'amico
participants.
Filippo
Now I'd like to
Castoldi che ci
leave
parlerà
the
della
floor to
valutazione our friend Filippo Castoldi. He will speak about the assessment of non-compliance and the obligations of economic operators. So please be brief, or else I will give you a ticket. You have the microphone? Yes, I do. So, non-compliance assessment. I'm not going to speak about the obligations of economic operators. No article speaks about that. Only Article 15. Authorities need to make what needs to be controlled available. That's all. We have 852 and 853 to comply with. I'm near retirement, and I'm sure I'm still going to continue to talk about new regulations. I have experience also in other countries of Europe, but in Italy, 852 and 853 have not been enforced, not only for control, for responsibility of economic operators, but in Italy especially because a lack of responsibilities of politicians, as Giovanni Granitto has explained in his previous speech. We're not attaching the right to defend ourselves. 625 really makes the scope broader. They refer to Article 7, and it has a greater scope. I don't want to speak about the controversy and all of these topics. Article 7 claims that you have the right of opposing any provision that has been decided by the competent authority. That is the right to defense that was not introduced previously in our regulation. So thanks to ASSICA, which has organized the meeting. And, I hope that there are going to be further talks also on new regulations that have been informed. I'd like to say that 625 broadens the scope, simplifies and clarifies many aspects. And this is extremely important because many aspects that were not as clear, the Commission, the Parliament and the Council, well, they have simplified that. So going back to your role, we have to go beyond compliance, so objectives and requisites. So additives, the Article 1965. In our terms, we have to verify what you carry out. So non-compliance where there are no provisions being defined. So what is non-compliance? This is what the law sets forth. I have to follow in the tracks. But I'm probably being banal here. So 82 degrees have to be maintained if it has to be below 100. No, it's not exactly true. So we have the formal compliance, the respect of the request. But if we read the new provisions of 852, especially 852, and also in minor terms 853, there is a specific emphasis on the ability and the shown ability of the operator of achieving the goals set by the provision. So we're speaking of goals, of objectives. And in fact, the main problem, I don't know whether it is set in a slide, but 178, which is very important in terms of food safety. But I'm going to get back to this. I'm not going to focus on this right now. Oh, no, it's in the slide. So the fact that it is compliant to the provisions legally and formally does not stop the authorities to set forth appropriate provisions in terms of the entry on the market. So milk, I analyze milk, I'm okay formally, but I'm not okay in the substance. The approach has been historically based in 1962. We have to go back in time on the analysis of the product. After 60 years where we have failed in this field, we know it's not enough. We have to analyze the process. The microbe charge in the milk has to be analyzed not only in the milk, but also the process. Therefore, everybody, controllers, operators, everybody, we need to look at the objective we need to achieve. This is the true compliance we need to respect. Therefore, it is not enough to claim I'm okay with the set requirements by the regulations, and 80% is not going to 80 degrees, sorry, is not going to be enough. In the HCCP, we should have 8 principles, and the 8th is the validation principle, i.e. I need to show that the provisions and the measures I have set forth are the best standard. So microbiological analysis says that 82 degrees is okay, but I can, by the way, validate my choices by showing how I have achieved the result. And this is a safety, food safety for consumers, but also for companies, because they can show they have operated effectively. This is the best defense we can follow. Now let's go back to official controls. I need to go back in my slides because today ASSICA has organized this talk, this conference on 6 to 5. But you see, we need to know the rules of the game. We need to know provision 625 extremely well by heart, so that you can regulate and decide your choices and process and manufacturing, etc. So we need to assess the risk on which pressure of control is set forth, which is more than the lag between controls. So which processes and how did you adopt that process? This is the main difference between compliance, formal compliance, and substantial factual compliance. So in number 27, we claim that we have to adopt proportioned provisions to the effective risk, and it's correct. 625 also requires another important element, i.e. official checks and controls by authorities should not set upon operators an unproportioned load vis-à-vis risk and results. This is the real right of defense. So not all of non-compliances are alike. There are some that have a minor impact and others that have a greater impact. Giovanni just reminded us, minor impacts are those that do not have an immediate risk. Greater risk, exposed to greater risk because of the consumer's risk. So an immediate risk is a time frame risk, and also that there is nothing in between that might mediate what is occurring, so the correlation between cause and effect. But that is another meaning for non-mediated. There is no other factor that can cause a risk. So let's speak clearly. Something that becomes a risk. Amongst colleagues, there is great confusion in this field. So if there is an accident in on the road because a rock has fallen, well, this is a risk, but you can, of course, change your way and go in another direction. But if the rock falls from a mountain and there is a road underneath, well, then this risk is an important risk. So the rock that fell on the motorway was thrown by someone. Here it fell because the road was built under the mountain. So to go back to our specific topic, we have to speak of products that have not entered the market yet. Therefore, I will not impact the consumer, and the operator can correct that danger. That is not an immediate risk because you can correct the mistake. Moreover, there is in 625, there is no faulty situation. There is a particular accent on fraudulent behavior, malicious behavior. So a voluntary violation and an involuntary violation. Nobody adds salmonella in a sausage, of course. But if the process has not taken in consideration the set of regulations referring to the processes that can protect the consumer from buying a sausage that has been produced and manufactured in processing with unsafe ways, well, there we have a crime. Our politicians let Article 5 remain a crime, and some other articles have decriminalized the processes, but it should be the opposite. We have to punish those who have not done all possible measures to prevent the risk. We know that in pigsties, there is a high prevalence of salmonella. And it's not that once you get to the slaughterhouse, there is someone who protects the process of slaughtering from salmonella. No, there's not this that is taken into account. So this is extremely important. So the minor can be solved, but if the problem is that the process has not been carried out properly, it is remediable. If it's not remediable, well, then we will go, according to Article 6 in the provision, ask why do you consider my behavior non-remediable? So this is a way, the only way in which I could explain what is remediable and what is not. Well, thank you very much, Filippo. You were also able to provoke our curiosity and allow us to understand things properly, thanks to your clear exposition. Now, let me see whether our other hosts are connected. Mr. Menditto and Mr. Stacchini of the Health Institute They tried to attend in presence, but they had previous commitments and they couldn't make it. So, Filippo, you launched the provocation to the Superior Institute of Health. Therefore, they will touch upon the points you have highlighted. Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me properly. Let me share my presentation.
Anche questo step è andato? Si vede la presentazione?
Can you see my PowerPoint? Okay, then very well. Thank you for the invitation. As properly claimed, we could not participate in presence. We had to stay in Rome because of the way in which disputes are managed. So we have to manage the different issues that have come up, and we have to focus on the second expert opinion, sampling, and disputes. So with the 625, Article 35 says that competent authorities say that operators who are subject to sampling, analysis, tests, etc., have the right to a second expert opinion. So this right allows for operators to require all the set of documents on the samplings that have been performed by the competent authorities, but we need a qualified expert that is an expert in the new article. Previously, it was named in a different way. In paragraph 2, we see that there is a specific element where there is no possibility for technical reasons to perform different samples, and there are 3 samples required: the prevalence, distribution, and perishability. In this case, the competent authority can delegate the possibility of guaranteeing the right quantity of samples so as to also carry out the second expert opinion. If this is not possible, the operator will be informed. Letter G does not refer to our issues at hand, and so I will not focus on that. When we have a situation where uphill, vis-à-vis the second expert opinion, there is disagreement, the provision sets that every member state decides to allow the operator to defend himself, i.e. to request at his own expense another analysis, test or diagnosis by another official laboratory. Italy has in fact done that, and there is the lab of the Superior Institute of Health that has been chosen. So the operator at his own expense will verify whether the lab that performed the analysis of the sample has followed what the law and the provision set forth. In paragraph 4 of Article 35, it is set forth that given that the operator can have a second analysis will not affect the obligation of competent authorities to take prompt actions to eliminate or contain the risk to human, animal, and plant health or the environment, especially regarding GMOs and plant protection products. So in 625, Article 35, let's assess what happens when Law Decree 27 shows in detail what and how the second expert opinion is carried out. So let's start from Article 7. When opportune and technically feasible, competent authorities will take samples in a number of samples that are enough so as to allow for the operator to defend himself in the dispute and in the second expert opinion. There is also the possibility that the operator gives up this possibility of having multiple samples, but this is registered and underlined in the minutes. In terms of sampling, given that we do not have enough time to focus on the specific aspects of the article, I saw that there is the abrogative provision, the abrogation in the Decree 42 that became enacted Legislative Decree 27. Well, in this provision, in this measure, we understand that the regulators have set forth the modalities of the sampling of the 32780, and this has been accepted within these provisions. In the 625 provision, therefore, it has been set forth that there can be reasons for which there can be two different possibilities of analysis. And so the operator and the competent authorities can decide to take the sample in one only take or in multiple ones, so as to allow for the second expert opinion. But this is further explained in detail in Article 2, the competent authority, and in special cases, as in microbiology, for example, there can be a single sampling. But the competent authority has to write down in the minutes the reasons whereby these exceptions have been set forth and allowed for. I should also say, and I'd like to stress that there was a lot of concern given the lack of defense possibility because of the sampling, but the 22 that became decree that became 71 of 2021 has modified this aspect, but this is an ongoing process. Therefore, we believe that in case of a criminal dispute, we will be able to tap into this provision. Moreover, there are other possibilities in the dispute situation. The lab, with the legislative decree 27, has to communicate the result to the competent authority, which will establish whether there is an unfavorable outcome of the analysis. So the competent authority communicates this outcome to the operator. In paragraph 5 of Article 7, there is the modality. It is explained on how the operator can present a request by 15 days of the receipt of the unfavorable outcome. And in the second expert opinion, if just one single sample has been taken, the aliquot can change. So, beyond the examination of the documents presented for the analysis, until we get to the dispute, we can achieve the counter report. We have 5 samples and the aliquot of the operator. In paragraph 6, the operators will go on along this pathway and will wait for the date of the counter report. When we have a situation where following the counter report, if there is a dispute between the operator and the competent authority, the operator has 30 days after the outcome of the unfavorable result to request to the competent authority the revision of the documentation and of the first sample that was analyzed. As Mr. Granitto said, all this is set forth in 32, Law 32. This is something that the operator has to follow. This is the peremptory request. But if the competent authority cannot allow the operator to achieve the documents in order to set forth the counter report, well, the operator can go beyond this time frame, because it is the competent authority or the lab that has not followed the precise time frame so as to allow the operator to perform the counter report. So by 30 days, the 30 days whereby the motion petition has been received, so the competent authority, not the operator, the competent authority has to submit its technical assessment according to Article 16 of Law 3190, and these technical reports have to be carried out by those who receive it. So what happens? Well, the Institute, when assessing documents, finds no negative elements by analyzing the documents or from the lab analysis. And so the technical assessment of Institute will claim we have examined all the documents that have been presented, even the lab results, and there is no condition whereby the operator can follow this direction. But this changes if the operator has carried out the analysis of its own aliquot, and in that case, well, the authority will have to analyze also these aspects and these details. Once the institute, the Health Institute, has drafted this technical assessment that is then given to the operator, competent authority, and lab, well, they have 30 days via a second motion petition that is submitted to the Institute and no longer to the competent authority intermediation, and access the analysis of the dispute. So the Health Institute will carry out a second analysis, so will go beyond the first analysis and carry out a second analysis of the aliquot presented by the operator. Even in this case, there is a tariff, there is a fee. When performing the analysis, following the entitlement of the technical assessment, it will follow the official requirements and it will be assessed by 60 days. And then the Institute will send the report to the operator and to the competent authority. We should also take note that the authority, according to all the documents that have been sent by the Institute and the analysis, can go back in terms of sanctions and penalties and confirm the initial outcome. Even in this case, the Decree 42 has given importance to the defense during the analysis phase of the dispute. So during the analysis phase of the dispute. And this has been reintroduced for this type of analysis as well. So, some observations. As Filippo already stated, the possibility of defending himself has increased. The operator has greater possibilities vis-à-vis the past. An example, if there's just one aliquot, a single aliquot, the operator can participate to the repeatable analysis and can also access the controversy. So the interest for the counter report is great. So the Italian law protects the operator, and the operator can participate actively to the administrative motion petition. So the operator can participate to the different and the public administration assesses and verifies whether the authorities have mismanaged the process is protected further by Law 625. So everybody, competent authorities, official labs, have to guarantee that everything is carried out in the shortest time frames possible. And so from the beginning to the end of this procedure, time has to be respected. So all public institutions in Italy have to be effective, impartial, transparent, and consistent in their actions on all of the national territory. As far as the actors, the players are concerned, I would like to highlight, I apologize for the terminology that they have used. So the sampling is the proceeding institute, and they are organizing the sampling. The body then communicates the results received by the official lab, and with the counter report, there is the qualified expert that will analyze the aliquot if available. So the ISS, the Superior Health Body, is this body which will decide and be active between the first dispute and the second dispute, together with the official lab. We are in between. What are the possible scenarios? As far as sampling and analysis, what can go wrong? Sampling can be carried out and be misperformed. There could be problems that the operators have highlighted for sampling and for the test. I have this slide, and I'm sharing it with you because we really need to be clear. In case of dispute, competent authorities and operators must be very punctual. For example, for administrative sanctions that came out of unfavorable analysis outcome. If a counter report is requested that highlights a mistake in sampling and analysis, the competent authority, since we are the body, has to carry out the second report, the counter report, and present it to the administration, because the law obliges the public authorities to be responsible of any further useful element that may be used in the procedures of public administration bodies. With the 241 articles that refer to the 21.5 and 25.9 with the reformulation of provisions. In case of mistake, let me repeat that. Moreover, the same competent authorities may find in the counter report useful elements that may interrupt the function of the petition to the Institute, and the competent authority will take its time to understand whether there is in fact a situation of dispute between the competent authority and the operators. So let's now focus on the Superior Health Institute, our body in the SAND documentation. We have defined the internal procedures by which we analyze the documents that we receive from the competent authority. We have been very, very careful in terms of compliance to the law 241 of 1990. And we acknowledged that an essential aspect of 249 is the participation to the administrative procedure of all the players. So we can negotiate and talk to all the participants in case of lack of concordance and in respect of transparency. And so there are negotiations, and these are all aspects that might be very difficult to understand if we only assess the documentation that we have received on paper. So I stop here. We have another meeting referring to dispute and counter reports. So please, if there are questions, do ask them straight away, because we have to get into another meeting, and we cannot clarify any doubts.
A questo punto raccolgo l'invito del relatore e se ci sono delle domande dalla sala, prego. Un attimo il microfono.
Thank you very much. I accept the invitation by the speaker. So if there are any questions from participants, we kindly ask you to pose them.
Prego.
Thank you very much. I'd like to seize the opportunity to ask for a clarification vis-à-vis the competent authority when some analysis and sampling are performed after or according the BRIC regional plans, because for these plans we often as producers don't receive analytical results. So if the producer has the right to defense and there are certain time stated in the decree 27, I don't see the same decree highlighting or offering indications vis-à-vis the other types of sampling related to the so-called plans, additional plans. We usually cannot have information about that if we don't ask to see the documents. I'm a technical consultant for some businesses of the agricultural sector, and personally the fact that I have to wait from 3 to 5 months to see the analytical results or outcome, that seems to me a little bit too long. When you ask for them, then you receive them. But I have also noticed another aspect, that very often
diciamo, rinvio da un soggetto prelevante,
you see that
ad un
the
soggetto
sampling
che ha effettuato l'analisi.
body
Mi pare di capire dai contenuti
says it is responsibility of the operator that performs the sampling, but according to the decree, only the operator that performed the sampling should give actually the analytical result. Is that right? Can you confirm that? I have to say that your question is quite technical, so I have to give different answers. So, with the new DPR, in case of official sampling, if we are not talking about a unique and irreputable aliquot, then the result should be shared with the producer. And in case we just have one aliquot sampled, if the competent authority declares the right of defense, so both the producer and the commercial part should be informed. So the right to defense is actually guaranteed. Second topic, who is in charge of what? So Decree 27 states that the competent authority that should deliver the results to the interested parties is the body that was responsible for the sampling. But please pay attention to this. We already have seen another situation. It might be the case that there is a competent authority for the territory vis-à-vis the producer that is not the same as the competent authority that performed the sampling. A concrete example. I can have maybe an operator that is in Turin. The operator trades the product in Milan, and so the competent authority for the sampling is the one in Turin, and the competent authority for the business itself producing the product is in Lombardy. In these cases, the competent authority that performs the sampling should inform the competent authority of the territory about the problem of a food-related product produced in another region. Another topic, the timing or the time you talked about. So we tried to clarify as much as possible that there is a co-participation of competent authorities and operators so that time is as short as possible. And we realized that very often it is not always the fault of the competent authority, and so the time is not so long only because of the competent authority. And as health institution, we have to guarantee that we avoid the behaviors that will prolong the time of the results. So, if we want to consider the problem of time in this framework, so we should be able to resolve this problem quite quickly. Let's talk about, for example, a microbiological analysis. It is performed quite rapidly with the right of defense, so it might be the case for these to be performed not in such long time. But of course, if we also have the dispute, the analytical dispute, then the time will be longer. But it won't be longer than the time of the previous procedure. So I don't see this as a worsening element. If we consider that operators and competent authorities are in line with all this, because we know that administrative procedures foresee the participation in these procedures, but when you referred to access to documents, be careful, because there we have a new institution that we have to quote, that is the Institution for Control Reports, as stated in the decree. So when operators are required to see the documents importance of the sampling and the analysis. So the reference is not access to the documents, but you have to present a motion for a second expert opinion as stated in the decree. I hope I've been able to answer your question because it was quite articulated. No, thank you very much. Your answer is very clear. But I was referring not to analyses that are not compliant, but to analyses related to some sampling, general sampling, that we usually cannot take track of. We never know if they were successful or not, if we don't ask directly to the sampling body for information. But anyway, you have been completely clear. Thank you very much. I was not done, actually, because this is another topic. And I'll explain you why. The dynamic of the institution of a second expert opinion is that you might have a non-favorable outcome that creates a dispute, and this dispute should be based on concrete elements. And so, after all this, we will have the dispute related to the documents and so on. But in most cases, when the sampling is performed just like this, to have additional information, we won't have an unfavorable outcome leading to a dispute and by the operator, and also won't lead the operator to ask for the second expert opinion. And so there we have the opportunity to defend as operators for this fact-finding sampling. Thank you very much. I see Filippo that would like to add something.
La risposta del dottore.
I'd like to go back to the answer given. So the exploratory sampling, it doesn't exist actually. We just have official sampling by the competent authority. Then official sampling can be done within the official controls or another official activity. When I, for example, perform monitoring, I don't have the legal criteria to respect. I'm just collecting information because maybe in the end, in the future, I like to state and create a legal criterion. But this is not the case right now, because I don't have the legal criteria to refer to, because we are within a monitoring activity. I want to say that maybe in the past this activity was overused, and I usually tell my colleagues that they do not have to perform monitoring when official controls are needed. So monitoring is not communicated, you're right, because it has no consequence. I hope I've been clear. Filippo, I'd like to add two important aspects, if I may. First of all, Article 35 is not applied in other official activities. So in all cases when competent authorities are required to perform official activities, control, profiling, and so on for animal diseases. So Article 35 cannot be implemented in this case. Second aspect, please don't forget that with Article 35, we know that object of a dispute and second expert opinion can also be related to diagnosis on live animals. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Dr. Menditto from Istituto Superiore di Sanità for his availability. I know you have a very busy agenda. If there are no other questions, we can move on with the other two speakers. I hope you are still with us online. Yes, of course.
Buonasera, dottor Menditto, sono Mariana.
Good afternoon, Dr. Menditto. I'm Mariana Aia. You said in your presentation that time, first of all, we don't have a deadline, so to say, as Mr. Castoldi said. We said that exploratory sampling don't exist, but even official sampling with all guarantees don't have a deadline according to which the authority has to communicate. We just say promptly, as soon as possible. And then we have a deadline for operators. So after 15 days from the sampling, the operator has to ask for the counter report. Then, after 30 days of the unfavorable indication, then you said if the documents don't arrive properly and on time, but this is not foreseen by the authority. Because I am now dealing with a dispute, and you will see it, that will show you that I haven't been able to assess analytical documents because I haven't received them. You know that it is always the case for us to assess the interpretation of the results, but then this is another matter for sure. But the question is, 30 days seems to be mandatory, so to say. Talking with the lawyers, I was told you have to do this within 30 days. I like to repeat myself. If the documents are not available because of the competent authority that was not able to deliver those documents on time, according to the Italian legislation of 1990s and of the Decree 33, 2012. So, in the case the public administration cannot offer all the documents needed, then you have to stop this deadline and give the opportunity to the operator to have the time that they need to perform the assessment. So, two elements, the decree, Legislative Decree 33, Article 35, Paragraph 2. But you say a certain deadline. Yes, we say that because it is not possible to do otherwise. An example, if we have an official lab that, against the law, is able to offer the data of analytical analysis after 6 months from the request of the operators, when is the deadline? I think months, if I have to apply the same term. No, the deadline starts when you receive the documents you required for. So the lab should have given you the documents. It hasn't done it, and so the deadline starts from that moment, so when you receive the documents. So if the defect or this problem of the operator is caused by a misbehavior of the public authority, then the competent authority has to say, this is my fault. I give you again another deadline to fulfill all the requirements. Thank you very much for your answer. I apologize in case we have other questions. Actually, we don't have enough time, but because after our event, there is another event, and we still have other two speakers here to present us their presentations. So thank you very much for your contribution. Again, Mr. Menditto. So now we are moving from food safety to quality and trade relationships, and I'm very honored to have Mr. Enrico Esposito from the Ministry for Agricultural, Food and Forestry Policies, and also Mr. Paolo Tolomei from Inspectorato for the protection of quality and fraud repression.
Prego, e grazie di essere qua. Il microfono.
So the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being here.
Prego.
Prova? Okay.
I hope you can hear me. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your invitation within this wonderful frame. And I haven't been able to walk around the different booths, but I will do after this speech. So let's go to the core of my speech, protection of fair commercial practices. On the 29th of July, the government has approved the framework to receive the directive, European directive for the protection from fair commercial practices. We have presented that to the Parliament and to the chambers, and so we have to adopt the final framework within the next deadline that we have. One premise before going into the details of this provision: very often our country, during the European legislation phase, is always lagging behind, catching up, very defensive in the collaboration with the other European member states to collaborate in the drawing of these provisions. But in this case, Italy was actually a guide, played a leadership role as regards the minimum standards that would be or will have to be respected by the business-to-business operators for food and agricultural products. We were leader actually because we are pioneering in this field. Italy, since 2012, had its own legislation on unfair commercial practices. This provision was a success vis-à-vis the respect of the payment terms, but for other aspects more related to some frauds and contracts. So this provision actually was not that successful because the opportunity to include some clauses in the contracts was actually still dependent from the different parties. And so we know that this legislation has to start from a common ground. So two parties actually negotiating the selling of a product
giocano con le stesse regole ma in posizioni di forza diverse.
Have to follow the same rules, but they have two different positions. Within the agricultural sector, Italy is an excellence worldwide, but it is very fragmented because it is made up of very small players that cannot create a system all together vis-à-vis the final consumers, and so they are very often forced to abuse some, or to suffer from some clauses in the contracts that are not that fair. So our attempt is actually to rebalance this situation. The Italian legislator has done something more. So the EU legislation has limited the unfair commercial practices. The Italian legislator has received European provisions, but also organized one code, because we are going to implement a code in order to repress unfair commercial practices that has reorganized all the different roles present in the legislation. It has also faced other problems, such as the sales at a lower cost, and this was a pain for producers. And it has also been able to identify a new subject that will be in charge of controlling and protecting from unfair commercial practices, also in terms of contracts. That competence was of the antitrust authority in the past, but starting from the 8th of November 2021, this competence will be given to the ECQRF, the Inspectorate. So you have to consider that we have two levels of
e le pratiche della grey list.
Contract clauses, the blacklist ones and the grey list ones. So blacklist ones are always forbidden. They cannot be included in the contract. If they are part of the contract is null by itself. So you can actually
ma anche l'applicazione di una sanzione
terminate the contract, and you can also actually receive the penalties for that.
Provo ad elencare soprattutto quelle più importanti.
And I like to list some of them, but it is a very long list. You will find all of these in the text that is going through the approval. So we have some drafts. For sure, among the blacklist commercial practices, we find the ones related to payment terms. In 2012, these payment terms was within 60 days, and now the novelty is to reduce it to 30 days for non-perishable goods. And, no, sorry, I was wrong, 30 days for perishable goods and 60 days for non-perishable goods.
Un'altra clausola
Another clause
che non può essere appunto inserita nei contratti
that cannot be included in the contracts is the one foresee the possibility to cancel orders
con un preavviso inferiore a 30 giorni. Quindi sarà obbligatorio
performed by the producer to the suppliers without a notice of 30 days.
Terza ipotesi vessatoria è
another hypothesis is the unilateral change of contract conditions. So it is not possible to change any conditions of the contracts, the method, the place, the time, the volume of the supply, ancillary services, unilaterally. Another clause that will be forbidden by this directive is the one foreseeing payments
che è un'ipotesi molto frequente.
Not related to agricultural and food products. I explain better. So, if I like to supply tomatoes to the large distribution, I'm asked maybe also to pay for the cleaning of the shelves. So, this kind of clause cannot be included in the contract anymore. Then, for example, the use of clause that force the supplier to be charged with cost related to the perishability of the products after the delivery of the goods. So once the goods are delivered, the risk of the fact that the goods can perish is only to be charged to the person who purchased the goods. It can seem quite obvious, but it was not in the contract. And it is also forbidden to refuse clauses not in written form. So all clauses should be in written form.
A un tipo di contratti in questo mondo che è il mondo appunto agroalimentare.
So now, within the agricultural and food world, we know that some negotiations are performed not in written form, but just by a shake of hand. So we cannot have this situation anymore. The acquisition of some commercial rights will be forbidden, and also
quindi anche minacciare
some repercussion and maybe threats to the suppliers. For example,
ovviamente una clausola.
You won't find my products on the shelves because of this or that, so this will be for sure forbidden. And the sanction can be up to 5% of turnover for the person actually who performed this kind of threat. These are the blacklist ones that will lead to the invalidity of the contract. And then we also have the grey list, so some practices that are presumably forbidden, but if the parts agree to accept them in a contract, they are not forbidden anymore. So we actually need the consensus of the two parts. Here we have a list, and I'd like to share some of these items with you. One of the novelties is the one that it is no more possible to buy products at very, very low cost within a kind of tender, where we see actually that the cost or the price paid is below the producing cost. It is also related to maybe some products that are unsold and cannot be sold at this very, very low price. You can do that only if you have the consensus between the two parts, or maybe some conditions related to the stocking of the products, the request to the supplier to be charged with the discounts performed by the seller. So maybe a good is sold at a certain price, and maybe the supermarket or the customer decides to apply a certain discount, a 20% discount. This cannot be charged to actually the producers, or the request to the producers to be charged with some marketing costs, or to be charged with the cost of organizing some spaces for the stocking of goods. These are some clauses included in some contracts. So the supplier is giving a good, and it is also charged maybe with the cost of the personnel that actually has arranged the product on the shelves, and this should not be the case. Obviously the list is very, very long. I don't want to waste too much time, but I think that we have already shared the most important practices. My premise was that there is a novelty related to the very low cost. So these sales will be only allowed if we have the risk of unsold goods, and we cannot unilaterally sell the products below the cost if it is not agreed by the two parties. And another novelty is the UCQRF, the inspectorate. So the inspectorate will be your point of reference if you want to report to be the victim of an unfair commercial practice, and the inspectorate will also be in charge of monitoring all the activities. For sure, we will have to improve also the number of people participating in that. And we are now talking with Felice Assenza, that is responsible for that. Which are the following steps? So for sure, before the final approval, we'll have to amend a little bit the test. The Parliament has already expressed its opinion. I don't want to go into details as regards the official process. So the Parliament expresses some opinions of the elements that must be included, and this is mandatory, and so we will include all of them. Substantially, they have included a clause that is quite important, foreseeing the fact that, for example, if we have agreed a price that is below the cost of production, this is actually a parameter when we want to control and check if this is fair or not. So we want to really guarantee to the suppliers the minimum amount of the producing cost, and this must be the case for the contract. We have also received some observations. We are assessing and evaluating some of them. We are trying to understand what to do for the sanctions, because in the provisory frame there are some imbalances as regards also some aspects of the turnover and so on, vis-à-vis the violation committed. So we have concluded this work in these days and in these weeks, because within the 8th of November we should go to the Council of Ministers and have the final approval. This will be for sure the first step, because I think that any legislation should just be a starting point.
È in un certo senso sperimentale, non sappiamo neppure.
I think it is a test for us. Let's say we are not aware of the problems that we might encounter, and so our idea is to monitor the implementation of this norm, and then maybe to fine-tune it according to what we see in the reality. So I think I'm done. Thank you very much for your attention. So Mr. Esposito, thank you very much for your brilliant description and explanation of this provision that we are actually waiting Not only at the European level, the association has worked a lot in collaboration to prepare this provision and to protect all the different trades and businesses happening within the supply chain. So I think this is a very interesting aspect. And I'd like now to leave the floor to Paolo Tolomei, from Inspectorate, the ICQRF, so he will be also in charge of this task, and he'll talk about the official sampling to verify the qualitative and also commodity characteristics of food. Thank you very much.
Ecco. Avviamo subito la presentazione.
Okay, let me open my presentation. Good afternoon. I am Paolo Tolomei, and I am the director of the ICQRF, so the territorial offices and the labs. And to cut it short, I'm going to just say Inspectorate instead of ICQRF. Allow me to explain our distribution on the territory. We are 720 units, 6 labs, 29 offices, and around 100 out of 720 are headquartered in Rome, and the rest are spread in the territory. And there are 400 inspectors who carry out audits on the territory. So the inspectorate's competences, this is just a very brief recap. We carry out official checks according to the 625 regulation. We carry this out both as an administrative police and legal police, and therefore in case of penal crime problems, we can also go to court. We can also fine and give penalties in case of unfavorable controls carried out by inspectors. We authorize and we distribute the various CDO, PGI, and guaranteed traditional specialty labels. Moreover, we have focused, especially this year, on unfair procedures. This is a new competence. We will play a role in terms of receiving reports in case of disputes, and we also carry out inspection. So this is a new field for us, but we really hope that we will achieve more resources, especially in terms of headcount. Now let's focus specifically on our topic for this afternoon's meeting. So the 625 provision on official controls. This is the provision that abrogated 882 and highlighted the competences of the controlling and inspection authorities, both at national level, but also exchange of information amongst the different administrative bodies of the member states. This slide is pretty crowded of information, but we want to focus on what is set in the provision. We focus, I would like to focus especially
prevalentemente l'interesse del Ministero delle Risorse
on
Agricole.
the
Il Ministero
interests of the
che insieme al
agricultural,
Ministero della Salute
the
viene
Ministry of
individuato come autorità
Agriculture,
competente ai
which
sensi del
together with
6.5
the
e
Ministry
quindi
of
l'ispettorato
Health
come organo di
are
controllo, autorità
together
presente
in
del Ministero delle
being
Politiche Agricole. Quindi
the
noi ci
bodies that
occupiamo di
enforce
controlli che
the
riguardano gli alimenti, che
legislation and the
riguardano
regulation. So
tutte
we
quelle norme
inspect,
che
we
sono volte a
audit, we
garantire
control
pratiche commerciali
the
leali tra gli operatori, quelli che
trade
devono tutelare le
practices
norme a
amongst
tutela degli interessi
operators.
dei
We
consumatori.
focus on
E qui apriamo
protecting
un altro mondo,
consumers,
parliamo del
their
regolamento
health,
1169 del 2011,
and
quello sull'etichettatura, la designazione e la presentazione degli alimenti.
the
Regolamento che
provision
è sanzionato da un decreto
1169 on
legislativo, il
labels,
251 del
the
2017, la cui
251 of
competenza è erogare la sanzione per l'ispettorato centrale. Quindi
2017 is
tutta questa
our
attività,
competence.
l'etichettatura,
So all
l'informazione, la
of these
presentazione degli
activities,
alimenti sul
labels,
mercato, è tutto un
presentations
argomento di
of
competenza
products on the
dell'ispettorato.
market
Così
really
come
go
anche nel
back
settore
to our
mangimistico, anche
competence,
qui
the competence of the
tutte quelle
inspectorate.
norme che sono
Also
volte a
feed,
garantire
these
queste
are
pratiche
all
commerciali leali e tutelare gli interessi
elements
di
that
informazione dei
have to
consumatori e
be
degli utilizzatori.
communicated
Abbiamo,
and
poi
protected
non
both for
in
the
secondo piano quelli che
consumers
sono la
and
produzione
the
biologica, l'etichettatura dei
business
prodotti biologici, l'uso
companies.
dell'etichettatura dei prodotti a denominazione di origine protetta,
Then
indicazione
we
geografica
also
protetta e
have
di specialità tradizionali garantite.
focus of
Quindi il decreto
protecting
legislativo 27 di cui già
certification
chi prima di me ha
of
già
the organic
parlato
products.
ampiamente, sia pure
So as
dal
I
punto
said
di
earlier,
vista
CDO,
salutistico, no?
PGI.
L'aspetto salutistico.
So
È
now
il decreto
focusing on
legislativo che ha
the
diciamo,
enacting
dettato le
legal
norme per
decree
adeguare la normativa
27,
nazionale a quelle
we
che
have
regolano, che sono le
there
disposizioni del
in
regolamento
we have set
625.
forth
E
the
come già è stato detto, questo decreto legislativo
provisions
che
so
di
as
quest'anno ha
to
dovuto subire un intervento correttivo
implement at national
grazie al
level
decreto
what
legge
has
42
been
poi convertito
decided
in
at
legge
European
71 del
level.
2021 proprio per
So
andare a
the
fare introdurre
number
determinati
42
correttivi che
and
avrebbero
the
creato
number
qualche
72
diciamo anomalia
of
nel sistema.
2021.
Allora, in estrema sintesi, anche perché poi ritengo che non si
So
può qui
I
illustrare
will
il
try
27
and be
nella
brief.
sua
It
totalità
is
e nei suoi
not
dettagli,
easy
quindi
to
ritengo che
present
vada
all
letto
the
in modo
details of
approfondito
the
e
provision
separatamente da
27.
da
I
questo
believe
diciamo
it has
seminario,
to
però
receive
è
an
importante avere degli
detailed
elementi di riferimento per poter
focus
capire
in the
esattamente questa
following
distinzione di
days or
competenze che
months.
nel decreto
But
legislativo
let's
27 sono
distinguish
state
on
fatte
the
tra quella che è
competences
l'autorità
between
sanitaria,
the
quindi la tutela
Health
igienico-sanitaria degli
Care
alimenti, quindi
Authority
la cura di
of
quell'aspetto rispetto a quell'altro
foodstuffs
elemento che è
versus the
l'interesse
other element,
merceologico, l'aspetto
i.e. the
qualitativo.
product
Quindi
and quality
le
aspect
chiavi di lettura del
of and
27 sono
safety
queste,
of
cioè dobbiamo
foodstuff.
individuare
So
i
these are the
settori,
two
i
main
settori
focuses
di
of
competenza e
provision
le diverse
27.
autorità
We have to
competenti
highlight the
e i settori
sectors
devono essere
that
individuati secondo queste due
refer to our
elementi,
competences.
secondo questi due elementi, cioè
And
dell'oggetto
these are
e
the
della
two
finalità.
elements, the
L'oggetto
object
sono
and
l'oggetto del controllo sono quindi i mangimi, sono gli
purpose.
alimenti, sono i
So the
sottoprodotti, questi
object
sono gli oggetti e
are
la
the
finalità del
foodstuff, the
controllo che è
feed,
la salute
and
umana,
the
il benessere degli animali,
products,
la salute
and the
delle piante, le
purpose,
pratiche commerciali
health,
scorrette,
plant and animal
l'informazione dei consumatori.
health,
Quindi
and the
i
information
settori, così come
given to
individuati con
consumers
queste due
and
chiavi, oggetto e
protection of
finalità,
the information.
fanno
So
sì
these
che
two
vediamo
sectors,
quali sono
object
i
and
settori di
purpose,
competenza di un'autorità, Ministero della Salute,
are
Regione, ASL, e i
interested
settori di
by the
competenza di
various
un'altra autorità che è
competences.
appunto il
So the
Ministero
various
delle Politiche
health
Agricole, Alimentari
bodies
e Forestali.
on the territory and the
Quindi
forestry
l'articolo
and
2 del decreto
agriculture
legislativo
minister.
dice
So
che
Article 2
ecco,
sets forth that sectors that refer to the health ministry of the regions of the autonomous provinces of Trento and Bolzano and local health care bodies. Article 2, paragraph 3 highlights sectors and control purposes that have to be carried out by the inspectorate. We also have paragraph 8 of the Ministry of Defense for the structure of the armed forces. So the controls that are carried out autonomously by the Ministry of Defense in terms of armed forces or soldiers that are on missions abroad. Now, let's focus on the Ministry of Agricultural Policies competences. They are set forth in Article 2, paragraph 3. So, foodstuffs for fair commercial practices, those that protect the interest and the health and information given to consumers, and the information on labels, and as I already stated, the safety of products. The same holds true for feed, for organic products, and the so-called CDO, PGI, and STG products. So all of these activities fall under the Agricultural Policies Ministry. So the ISR that are competent at regional level and which coordinate the regional parties working on the territories. I will not focus on this aspect, but on the other elements. So, provision 27 of the law decree. They focus to all authorities, the healthcare authorities, Article 2, paragraph 1, or commercial trade practices, consumers, Article 2, paragraph 3. So we really need to focus on how the articles are presented. In the articles, initially, there is the word control, authorities, sectors of Article 2, paragraph 1, means that those provisions only apply to those sectors, ministry, health ministry, regions. And this holds true for 4, 5, 6, and 7. Again, earlier we spoke of the counter report of the disputes. All of these refer to the health authority and not of the MIPAF, the Ministry of Agricultural Policies. Therefore, the inspectorate had a problem when the decree came out, Decree 27, which offer the discipline that has to be followed of 283/62 and the 327 of 1980. Why? Well, because the activities relating to trade, to quality of foodstuffs are in pretty old provisions. 1925 and in 1961. So these laws were passed many years ago. So the origins refer to the health care law that were referring to things passed. In the 327, it is stated that the procedure provisions here presented are applied and have to be compatible with the provisions of 1962 and 1951. So until the legislative decree 27 entered in force, we acted according to the very old laws that referred to the health care ministry. When 283 and the executive decree were passed, we would have gone back to the past and had to follow the laws of 1926 and 1962 again. So this is why we had this need of presenting these provisions in the new law that could be used not only by the health care bodies, but also by the bodies that focus on the controls and trade products. Now, Article 20 of the provision presented the attachment 3, which is our present measure that sets forth the rules, the modalities of sampling of food products, and for the competence of Article 2, paragraph 3. And in fact, if you look up attachment 3, they focus exactly to these sectors that are under the umbrella of the inspectorate. So the attachment put forth what was already set forth in the Law 327. So we took this provision and just copied all of the procedures set forth in the 327 and enforced them in attachment 3. So there is the protection of the products and of the quality. As far as the techniques that are followed by the inspectorate in terms of sampling, well, the story is quite complicated, but this is the reason why I'm not going to focus on this. I'll just say that if compared to the past, as far as we are concerned, nothing has changed. And in terms of taking the samplings, and also in terms of the right of defense, which is probably the question the topic you're mainly interested in. So the same provisions that were foreseen in the past are still in force. So The measures have not changed. Counter reports and disputes do not change as far as our competence is concerned. We follow 689 in terms of fees, of sanctions and penalties, and we follow the law of 1925, Article 44, as far as the crime, criminal offenses. So we have to say that nothing really changes. Article 15 foresees that the lab manager, once the analysis has been carried out and sees that there is a fraudulent problem, they have to notify the outcome to the operator, who can ask for a counter report by 15 days in which they have received the communication. 389 also offers other guarantees. In Article 17, when inspection or analysis have highlighted malfeasance, the operator can present documents in his defense by 30 days from the notification. So in the end, for criminal offenses, we have to follow the criminal code and observe it in our activity. So the lab manager, in case of a crime, they have to immediately inform the legal authorities. They are competent in terms of provide authorization to the operator in case a counter report is required. So defense rights remain. Nothing has changed. Now, going back to attachment 3, again, it sets forth that sampling follows the modality of 5 aliquots. Out of these 5, 1 is always taken and given and set aside. The other 4 go to the lab. 1 is for the first analysis, the second for the counter report, and the 3rd and 4th are for the authorities. So again, under this point of view, nothing has changed. We have further pros, I would say. We have not been obliged to change our procedures or inspections. Therefore, we will carry on. What we did in the past is what we will do in the future. Many thanks to our speakers. There has been a very important focus on all the different topics. Unluckily, we do not have the time to ask questions because we have another event that is going to start in a couple of minutes. So those who are connected or who are here can send the questions to ASSICA and you will receive a reply to your questions. Many thanks for your attention. It has been a very interesting afternoon. Thanks to all of our speakers again, Filippo and Giovanni, who were really very precise in illustrating these novelties in the legal framework to us. Thank you.